Hello and welcome to a new episode of Search of the Record, the podcast coming to you from the Google Search team, where we talk all about search and maybe have some fun along the way. My name is Martin, and I'm a job title. Oh boy, we should update these notes. My name is Martin, and I'm a search relations engineer on the search relations team at Google. But I'm not alone today. With me is Gary. Moin, Gary. Gary?
Yes.
Are you here?
I hear.
Are you there? You hear me? Okay, good. Gary, I have a question.
Okay.
I noticed that we recently updated the crawler list, and someone reached out to me and said like they were crawled by Google. I'm like, I don't think that's a thing we like a user agent we use. But apparently that was one we used, and I'm not sure how that happened. But I think that was a whoopsie. But how maybe we should actually explain how Googlebot works and what that part of the pipeline is. What do you think? Should we talk about Googlebot? We should talk about Googlebot.
I mean, technically that was correct. They were crawled by Google.
Fair. Yeah. Coming from a Google IP address. Yeah.
So, technically correct. And we all know that the best kind of correct is technically correct.
It's technically correct. That's true. But
let's talk about it. Let's start with something very obscure. Let's just call it crawler first. Mm-hmm. And it's been around for as long as Google itself. Well, actually, probably predates it, because for starting a search engine, you need a crawler, right?
For a bunch of things, you need a crawler.
Yeah, like when you go out pubbing or something. Oh, okay. No.
No, if you want to use data that is on the network, you need something that requests it, right? And I think, isn't that what a crawler fundamentally is, or part of what a crawler is? Crawler probably does more than that, right?
I mean, yeah, but technically crawlers are just HTTP clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Much like your browser, which is also more advanced, I guess, HTTP client, because it can do more things than just fetching data from over the network. Mm-hmm. But technically crawlers are just really dumb browsers. Maybe? No?
I mean, there's this library and also a command line utility called curl, right? CURL. Yeah. That's a crawler, kinda, I guess.
I mean, you can use it as a crawler. Worst case scenario, you would write a shell script, for example, to loop through a set of URLs that you pass on to the curl thingy, and then it fetches the stuff for you, and then you save it to disk. And technically, that's what a minimal crawler is as well. I think in I don't know if it is in curl, but in Wget, you definitely have an option to recursively crawl something or fetch something. So basically, it will attempt to extract URLs from the blah that you fetched from a particular URL, and then it will attempt to access and download those URLs, and then you can set the depth limit, like how deep do you want to go from the initial URL. And I think also whether you want to stay on domain or not, or something like that. But technically, that's already a crawler, right? Because you go out on the internet, you find URLs, starting from one URL, you find URLs, and then eventually you will fetch those URLs as well that you just found. I think there was something Sergey Brin, our co-founder, I think. Well, yeah, I know that he's a co-founder, so not think. But anyway, I think he said that this was very, very early on, that if you take a very popular page, again, this was like mid-90s or end of 90s or something like that, 1990s for the very young listeners. And if you take a very popular page, like the homepage of CNN or Wall Street Journal, Fox News or whatever, and you can just follow the links, where follow means that once you found a URL on a page, you will just fetch it again. You will fetch that URL and then so on, basically recursively just fetch URLs that you found on the internet. And if you start from a very popular page, you can actually crawl the whole internet just from that one starting point. Now, obviously, that doesn't hold true anymore, but yeah, it was a much simpler internet, and it was much easier to fetch back then.
But I guess if I were to write a shell script that loops over a list of URLs and maybe even extracts URLs from these URLs and then keeps going, there's probably more to it than just that, because the internet has grown quite a lot. And I can imagine that that approach won't work today.
I mean, it depends what you want to do, right? Because if you just want to crawl set of pages from a site, for example, like you want to mirror your site locally, then technically you could do that. I think there are other problems that you need to take in consideration, especially nowadays. Like there's so much automatic traffic on the internet, on sites, that like if you want to be on your best behavior, then you want to at least support Robots.txt, like the robots exclusion protocol, and have some system, I guess. I wanted to say algorithm, but it's not like a singular thing. Like have a system that monitors the health of the host and backs out, like slows down if the host is becoming unhealthy.
So it adjusts scroll rate, basically.
Yeah. Because you don't necessarily want to be an ass, and you want to kind of behave, right?
Okay.
Otherwise, you are just like DOSing the server.
Yeah, I guess your neighborhood is not gonna like that if you bring down all the websites. So when Larry started doing his BackRub system, that must have eaten a lot of bandwidth.
I guess that's relative. Also, why would anyone name anything BackRub? Like I always had a beef with that, because it's such a weird name to give to a even an academia search engine or academic exploration or whatever. Like calling it BackRub is just,
it's creepy.
Why?
It's a bit odd. Yeah, I mean, it's a backlink and you get something for backlinking, and then it's like rubbing someone else's back. But I like you, Gary, but please don't rub my back, thanks.
You sure?
Yeah, pretty sure. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, this is sad.
No,
but I think to your point that must have consumed lots of bandwidth. Like back in the days, one thing was that pages were way more lightweight.
True.
Like way more lightweight. Like I remember when one of the first sites, this was late 90s, sites, a few pages. Well, it was a site, I guess. And the HTML that I put together was like 7,000 bytes. Like 7 kilobytes.
That's nothing today. That's like an image, basically. Actually, images are probably larger these days.
Yeah, much larger. Like, it's so tiny that, like, even if you crawl like hundreds of thousands of them, it's not going to make a dent in your budget. But on the flip side, bandwidth was much more expensive than nowadays.
So they must have had some sort of system to monitor that they're not exhausting the very expensive bandwidth.
Their bandwidth. But then you also have to take in consideration the site's bandwidth.
Oh, God, yes, true. They pay for it as well.
So yeah, I think it was much easier to crawl the internet back in those days when BackRub was coming up online, but it also was trickier for a different reason, and that was probably cost. But
Fair.
yeah, we had BackRub. I don't know how fetching was done for BackRub. I would imagine that they just had some shell script or something that just fetched all those pages for them to create the initial index for BackRub. Again, I'm just making this up. I actually have no idea. But it was likely not that complicated because the web was so much smaller.
But I mean, yeah.
I was reading just before this recording the anatomy of a large-scale hypertextual web search engine paper that Sergey and Larry published at Stanford. And they are talking about 110,000 web pages and web accessible documents for one of the early search engines called...
That's cute.
Yeah, World Wide Web Worm, or www. This was 94. And then there was the other one from the guy that came up with the idea of Robots.txt, Robots Exclusion Protocol. I wanted to say his name too fast. I forgot. And he also had a search engine called Web Crawler and claimed to have indexed about 2 million pages.
Oh, wow.
And in today's scale, 2 million is still like, that's cute. Right?
I think the boundary for someone to worry about crawl budget is what, 10 million? 1 million? Something like that?
I would like, for a single site, I would say like 1 million is
okay.
Probably.
And that's pretty much like half the index.
Of course, it also, yeah. But I mean, you also have to, like when we crawl about like crawl budget or how much load we put on the server, you also have to think about how the site is constructed, because if you are making expensive operations to construct the page, then of course it's going to put much harder load on your site than a simple HTML site, right?
True. That's true.
For example, if you are making expensive database calls, like that's going to cost the server a lot. So yeah, but back then it was much simpler anyway.
Wild. And okay, so bandwidth is a thing. We've talked about that. But now Google does a lot of things that probably need to ingest data from the web or want to ingest data from the web. Does that mean that we have like lots of shell scripts? Or how do we handle that these days? Because I think bandwidth needs to be taken care of across products, no?
Yeah. But I mean, back when we only had, so we had BackRub, or Larry and Sergey had BackRub, right? And then they launched Google in 96. Yeah, 96. Then they launched Googlebot, basically the crawler that they were using for the search engine. I think they might have named it Googlebot in 99. Like before that, it was just like nothing. Although I know that from the very beginning of Google, Robots.txt was supported. So like whatever they were using, it was already allowed site owners to opt out from crawling. But then we started having multiple or new products, right? Like we had AdWords coming out in early 2000s, and then AdSense 2003, I think, ish. And then you also have some kind of fetching in Gmail, which is a 2005, 2006 thing. So like, for example, like fetching the images, because you don't want to allow the browser to fetch the images remotely, because then you're giving away users' metadata to remote sites. So you want to proxy somehow those image fetches in emails. Anyway, so more and more products had to do some fetching. And for a time, I think everything was done with the Googlebot, which was just like this service that you plugged a URL in and it fetched it for you. And it was always just Googlebot, and you could give it 1 million URLs or just 5, and it would fetch it for you in the limits of the host load that individual sites would have. Not a very nice design when you are designing for multiple products, because then people can't really tell apart what was the fetch for, right?
Okay, yeah.
Because it just looks like Googlebot came and it fetched something, and you are like, "Oh, I'm going to be on Google," like early 2000s. Gary very excited about being on Google, but then it was actually a fetch initiated by, let's say, Gmail or AdWords or something. So I never end up in the Google index, and not because I was a spammer. Definitely not because of that.
Sure. Spammy guy. Phooey.
So we introduced new crawlers, but that would also mean that with all the software engineers that we have and computer scientists, every now and then someone would came up with a brilliant idea that, I will just write my own crawler because I need my own user agent. Which again is not great, because then, like, from maintenance perspective, it's an absolute nightmare. And then different crawlers that people wrote might have different policies about, like, Robots.txt and host load and bandwidth usage and whatnot. So eventually someone had to come up with this idea that, okay, we will just have this one unified system, and you can fetch with it from the internet, but you have to specify your own user agent string when you are fetching. And then I think in 2006-ish, Google AdWords comes out with Google AdsBot. And then from then on, we started having more and more crawlers, named crawlers, that is not Googlebot.
And all of them behave the same way?
I mean, yes. And that was the nice thing about the shared infrastructure, right? Because then you could have like a common way to behave on the internet for every crawler that you send out.
All right, okay. But
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, because basically you now are bundling all the, so to speak, traffic that goes out to websites in terms of crawling through a lens of one piece of code, which I think makes a lot of sense. Yeah. The one thing that I could see is unfortunate is what if, so I see that like all of them behave the same way because they are all kind of robotic agents that go out and do something for an automated system. But what if I need to write a piece of code that does more or less the same, but is like user initiated? So if a user clicks on something, like, I don't know, I submit something for a review or for a specific product where I specifically say like, hey, please do this, then I'm not sure if following robots makes sense, for instance. It might make sense in some cases, but it might not, because it's not really a robot then if I ask it to do something.
I mean, that's a very philosophical question, whether it's a robot or not. And nowadays with all the AI agents and whatnot, there's more and more discussion about this. But yeah, you're right. Like when a user is sitting behind the keyboard and wants to complete a specific action, let's say that they want to load something in a spreadsheet from a specific URL, then you are doing a fetch on behalf of a user. So I think you're right that ignoring robots.txt in those cases is the right thing to do, unless the team that is providing that feature actually wants to follow robots.txt. So basically, you might want to opt out. The other thing would be latency, because with crawlers, you have like a massive URL database from where they take the URLs that they need to fetch. And then you have to sort that somehow. And then basically by the time, and then when a user would fetch, then you add that to that bucket, to that database. It ends up on the bottom of the list. And then you have to wait for the earlier added URLs to be consumed until you reach the URL that the user just added. And that might sometimes take weeks as well. Like sometimes it's just like you have no time to fetch fast enough, or you have other limitations. And then with user agent fetchers, what you can do is that I more or less ignore the signals that the sites give and basically just try to make the fetch immediately. And for example, in Search Console, you can see this when you do the
live test,
site verification, or the live test. Well, actually, not the live test. Site verification. The live test is actually a crawler.
Oh, yeah,
like
because it needs to.
It's a high priority, but it's still a crawler.
Yeah, fair. But site verification, yeah, that makes sense. That's a user triggered thing, and
yeah. And you don't have to wait for it for hours or weeks. It happens almost instant. I will not say that word.
Instantaneously.
Yeah, that.
Okay.
But yeah, I think you need both of them, because like there are different use cases. Really.
That makes sense. But in terms of different use cases, it doesn't sound like this is a use case specific to Google. So I guess other people have crawlers as well then.
Yeah.
And okay. We were not the first ones to do this, right?
Yeah, exactly. The World Wide Web worm operated their crawlers before Google was even conceptualized. Like even before Larry had the idea that, hey, PageRank, we could use this to something.
Yeah, and since then we have other search engines and I guess, a lot of crawlers these days. Do you see like a change in the way that crawlers work or behave over the years?
Behave, yes. How they crawl, there's probably not that much to change. But, well, I guess back in the days we had HTTP 1.1 or probably they were not crawling on 0.9 because no headers and stuff like that's probably hard. But anyway, but nowadays you have H2, H3. I mean, we don't support H3 at the moment, but eventually, why wouldn't we? And that enables crawling much more efficiently. Because you can stream stuff. Stream meaning that you open one connection and then you just
do multiple things.
Things on that one connection instead of opening a bunch of connections. So like the way the HTTP clients work under the hood, that changes, but technically crawling doesn't actually change.
Okay.
And then how different companies police their or set policies for their crawlers, that of course differs greatly. And if you are involved in discussions with the IETF, for example, the Internet Engineering Task Force, about crawler behavior, then you can see that some publishers are complaining that crawler X or crawler B or crawler Y was doing something that they would have considered not nice. Yeah. So yeah, like the policies might differ between crawler operators, but in general, I think the well-behaved crawlers, they would all try to honor Robots.txt or robots exclusion protocol in general, and pay some attention to the signals that sites give about their own load or their server's load, and back out when they can. And then you also have what are they called? The adversarial crawlers, like malware scanners and privacy scanners and whatnot. And then you would probably need a different kind of policy for them, because they are doing something that they want to hide. Not for malicious reason, but because malware distributors would probably try to hide their malware if they knew that a malware scanner is coming in, let's say. Okay, I was trying to come up with another example, but I can't. Anyway, yeah. What else do you have?
Okay. Well, I think...
and then you have the bad actors, right?
All right, yeah.
They are just like, I just want to crawl half of the internet in 25 seconds.
Yeah. They might overpower your server, and that is not a very nice thing to happen, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the need to ingest data from the web, and then you build infrastructure to do that, because it's not a trivial thing. And at Google, we have kind of like shared infrastructure for that. That's pretty cool. And we try to be a nice citizen of the web, so hopefully other crawlers will continue to do that rather than try to ingest the whole internet in 25 seconds. That sounds fun, but I don't think that's feasible in the long run. Also, for people operating websites, you might just have like random traffic spikes, and these traffic spikes might still cost you some money.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that we've been doing last year, right? Like, we were trying to reduce our footprint on the internet. And of course, it's not helping that then like new products are launching, or new like AI products that do fetching for various reasons. And then basically you saved 7 bytes from each request that you make, and then this new product will add back 8. But like you like the internet can handle the load from crawlers. Like, I firmly believe that this will be controversial, and I will get yelled at on the internet for this, but it's not crawling that is eating up the resources. It's indexing and potentially serving, or what you are doing with the data when you are processing that data that you fetch. That's what's expensive and resource intensive. So yeah, I will stop there.
Okay.
Before I get in more trouble.
Okay, before I put you in more trouble, thanks a lot, Gary, for explaining crawlers to me. And that's the past and present for crawlers. But what's the future gonna look like? Are we working on something, or HTTP 3 is something that we will eventually get around to, I guess? But what else?
Yeah. I mean, H3 is not going to solve the bigger problems, I don't think.
No.
Like what? Like, we just get the trailers, but you get the trailers with H2 as well, I think. So it's like it's not going to fix our bigger problems.
Well, what do you think are the bigger problems first, before we talk about solutions?
The web is getting congested. And it's because like everyone and my grandmother is launching a crawler or fetchers or whatever. We will have more automatic traffic from AI agents, for example, and other AI shenanigans. So basically the web is going to be more congested, but it's not something that the web cannot handle. Like the web is designed to be able to handle all that traffic, even if it's automatic. And I would say that it's in good hands. If they see that there's some problems with load and whatever, then they will just come up with some new technologies that will fix that or reduce that issue. What else? I really like what Common Crawl is doing, because they release data sets. So basically they have their crawler and then they crawl some parts of the internet and then they release that as a data set. So you don't have to crawl yourself. And I think that's very nice, because then you basically have the same thing that we have internally, basically a single infrastructure doing the fetching, respecting Robots.txt and host load and whatnot. And then you can just consume the data. Of course, internally, you can just consume the data. That's different. Like, you still have to do fetches, but at least the robots exclusion protocol policies and host load is enforced for the crawl job that you set up. I don't know if we need more of these, but yeah, I thought it's a good idea, and it's a nice idea.
Okay, all right. Well, Common Crawl then. That's something that I don't think I looked into. I should probably have a look at that. Well, in that case, thanks a lot, Gary, for giving me a journey through the world of crawling. And I do hope that you all out there enjoyed this episode and had a good time. If so, let us know in the comments, like and subscribe to hear more of our episodes, and also tell us if you want to have a specific episode for a specific topic. So with that, again, thanks, Gary, and enjoy your time listening to this out there. And bye-bye, listeners.
Goodbye.
Oh, God, why? Bye-bye, Gary. We've been having fun with these podcast episodes, and we hope that you, the listener, have found them both entertaining and insightful too. Feel free to drop us a note on LinkedIn or chat with us at one of the next events that we go to if you have any thoughts. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you and goodbye.